my residence, and we are working on several phases of a project. The first phase being request for approval of a retaining wall. There is currently no retaining wall there. We are trying to shore up the front of the yard, and my client and I have discussed and would appreciate or would like to have is that this retaining wall have a stacked stone look. It is our understanding that a stone look isn't what the city is used to, and we wanted to address the board to discuss the fact that we are kind of seeing it often in many locations throughout Lewis, historic and non-historic areas. So I have provided a sample, some literature in regards to the stone, what it looks like, what it will look like. We originally put together a diagram that didn't really represent what the stone looked like. I just wanted it to represent a wall. The stone is on one of the attachments, a picture of the type and color of the stone, which is very kind of earthy tones that would look like any other kind of stone being used. My client also has some pictures that have been presented that show multiple properties throughout having this very similar kind of product. So what our request would be is that we, be able to construct our wall, which is a 3-foot tall wall in length of about 30 feet with a set of steps going in it. Very nice. It would look very presentable to the community. Really a value to the property because there is currently nothing, and he has some erosion, which probably at times during weather could wash into and I don't know if it has, but may wash into the sidewalk area. So it's kind of it's not only a aesthetic approach we're looking for, but it's also something that it creates stopping some of the deterioration of the art. So
Sure.
The wall would be constructed, the kind of the structure piece of it would be based on a concrete footing, which we would then tie in cement block as its kind of structural piece. We use steel. We grout those blocks every 4 feet typically, and then we also put steel in them. So we put steel in the footer in the block so we have a solid foundation. Then the surround of it, the back of it will be backfilled then to come to grade. There will be a slight reveal in the back, which will then have the stone that we've presented, and then the top will be capped with a blue stone, which is also very common, similar to what you're seeing in the pictures up there. So what we've presented in our documents is really pretty identical to what we're looking to do. It's not a large wall. It's not something intrusive or obnoxious, and it will look quite lovely when it's all done. So what we're asking to do, we know that brick is kind of gets the blessing at all times, and stone, in my belief and in my client's belief, has historic look. Stone was probably prior to brick in many applications back then. We use a different stone these days, but it still looks the same. So that would be our request, that we be able to give the go-ahead to move forward with this. We have purchased stone based on an original conversation, and then we, with one of the gentlemen in, do we remember what his name is? my office manager has been dealing with him. He's the gentleman that kind of handles all the paperwork and provides it to you guys. So that he's on staff.
Robin Davis?
Oh, Rob, excuse me, Rob. We both spoke on the phone.
That's right, that's right.
Rob, we originally, my apologies, we originally spoke and we didn't think there'd be too much of an issue, and because of where we are in this the climate of construction materials, those things have to be purchased way in advance because there's 6 to 12 week lag times on some of this. So we went ahead and purchased the stone, only to kind of, Robin said, hey, wait a minute, we may have a problem with this. This is probably going to have to go against in front of the board. And I said, that's not great because this is a non-returnable item. So we'll figure that out if we can't move forward with it. And there's plenty of people who are looking for stone.
You might even make some money.
They might make some money on it, who knows?
Yeah.
But ideally, our goal is, and we think it looks the best, will look the best for what he's trying to do for this beginning phase of the project and for the future of it. So that is...
Okay, that's your story.
That's my story. I'm
We're gonna
sticking
stick
to
to
it. I appreciate the opportunity to present and to have this discussion. I'm a resident of Lewis, I live in 5 Points, so this is my home as well. So I understand what we try to do to keep it beautiful. So
Thank you very much.
I'm happy to ask questions, or if you want me to sit down.
Well, why don't you stay there?
Okay.
And then if we need someone else to come up and answer a question,
Sure.
we will.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just want to go over the documents that was supplied by the owner tonight. The first picture, I think, was what he said, is this a better mock-up of what is actually
better.
more going to look, to replicate what's going to be there, hopefully if it's approved. Also, you have the pictures of multiple homes. He said he went around the city and took these pictures showing that there has been stone veneer retaining walls or stone retaining walls. And then he's also circled areas where he's noticed retaining walls within the city.
You've gone to a lot of trouble. You really don't want to return the stone, I can tell.
Yeah. Well, it's more of a personal preference, I think. It's, we lay a lot of brick. We do a lot of brick, but I try to do what my clients want.
Sure,
he would like to have stone.
That's your job.
Yeah.
Okay, well, why don't we just go around and, I don't know, Michael, did you want to start since I'm staring at you, or you want me to come back to you?
You can come back.
Okay. All right.
Another Michael.
Yeah. Would you?
Yes, I just have a couple of questions about these pictures that you provided. Do you know how many of these pictures are actually in the historic district versus not?
Yes. I think Adam can probably speak to that better.
Yeah, I mean, just give me a ballpark.
Yeah, so I'm the one that
so,
actually took
'cause
the
he's
photos.
got-
All of those are in the historic district. The only pictures I took were in the historic district. This is Adam Silver here.
Thank you. In the years that I've been on this commission, we have not, and I have a fairly decent memory, of all the applications that we've reviewed and approved or not approved. Not one of them has come with this type of stone. Not that's here or there, I'm just telling you the entire time. So I am curious as to these properties that have the stone. When did that happen? Because the HPARC,
Well,
HPC.
Yeah, well, I recognize some of them, and I don't believe, I'm going to guess, but I know some of them never came before us because they were done as a landscaping project. And so that landscaping projects are not required to come before us when they're done by the homeowner or by themselves, so.
Happy to call it a landscaping project.
Well, that I think.
And
Well, in essence, it is a landscaping project. Like I said.
I know, that's not, that doesn't give,
I'm not trying to go
yeah,
there,
it doesn't
but
give you
in
a
essence,
pass.
it really is,
But I'm
because
just
it's part of it.
explaining that,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
these,
Well, on Kings Highway, and I've lived here for a number of years now, some things you look at, some things you don't notice and go like, oh, I didn't know that, is that going up and down Kings Highway, what I saw was a lot of concrete blocks that have been there long before our historic preservation. You can just tell by just looking at the stone.
Sure.
The other thing that I saw was mostly brick, and of course you're looking at most of these retaining walls are on the east side of Kings Highway as opposed to the west side, which the west side has, in most places up there, are a little bit flatter. The elevation of the houses are higher, so it makes sense in the first place to have a retaining wall. But my opinion is that the brick would be more acceptable, would go with what we call the rhythm and scale of the street. So that's my opinion at this point, but I'd certainly like to hear from the rest of the commissioners.
okay, Phil?
Yeah, what's the date of the house? When was the house constructed?
This is Adam again. So the house was constructed in 1897. I can tell you a little bit of my thought process behind why I chose stone to begin with. So when I first wanted to choose a material, the first thing I did was, okay, so what is actually an approved material for the town? So I went to the code, and it said there's a strong preference for brick, but natural stone and stucco veneered concrete block is an acceptable alternative. So I said, okay, so strong preference for brick, let me see what's around town. So I took my bike and went around town, and I noticed with walls, there were a lot of stone walls. There were brick walls too, there were stone walls, there were sort of both. And so then I said, okay, so what would be the best look for a Victorian Queen Anne style home in a normal sort of 1890s period? So I did a lot of research online, and almost all my research said stone. Like, they didn't use a lot of brick walls. They did some brick and foundations. They built some of the houses out of brick, but almost all the walls that were built as retaining walls around Victorian-style homes in the late 1800s was all stone. And so I thought it would be a more historically accurate look to use stone than to use brick. And that's really why I went with stone to begin with, was actually trying to make it more historically accurate rather than sort of, and if there was no other stone in town, I would have said, okay, well, historical accuracy aside, the brick is going to fit the town better. But because I saw so much stone in the actual town, that was sort of my thought process behind it.
I suspect that most of the stone you see is new stone.
Yeah.
Because, in our guidelines, when we refer to stone, we talk about ballast stone, which would have come over on ships.
Right.
Not, and it's specifically, and it's in the section that talks about facing of foundation, brick, parge, stucco, ballast stone.
I mean, I agree, but
I just need to have the mic.
I understand, and I do agree that ballast stone was probably the traditional, but the actual code said natural stone. It didn't actually specify.
It says ballast. Yeah, but, and also, you have to remember the area that you researched. This is not a stone area. This is a flat, sandy area. So the brick that we have is man-made brick. And so that you go into the New England area or Pennsylvania or other places, you would have stone available. And so that's why you see stone on historic houses. It's the geography.
No, I totally understand. This was just my thought process of why I was going to.
I appreciate you explaining that to us.
And the reason I asked about the date of the construction of the house was because at that time, there were two building materials for stone, and one was brick and the other was stone, and the stone was field stone. And again, we didn't have field stone here, and so the wall was more likely going to be brick. I think brick is more in keeping with the date of the house and in the rhythm and scale of the street. But also, you already have brick there, and it just seems appropriate to add to the brick, and the stone is not the scale of the stone doesn't fit the house. The dimensions of the brick, the scale of the brick fit the house and historically are more correct.
The brick is not in good shape, so the brick is,
Were you going to replace the whole walkway with stone?
well, there's not much of a walkway, and
Okay,
there's some steps, it's all a
No,
bit.
the existing
yes,
walkway.
yeah,
The existing walkway goes all the way from the top of the steps all the way, and then the steps up into the porch.
It's not a very long area, though. It looks longer than it is. But
So are you
yes,
telling-
we're going to replace the step, we're going to put the bluestone steps, which would also match the cap of the wall. So the wall itself would the cap to the wall, which Adam prefers the bluestone, it's a nice color, good-looking stone, would then also be the treads of the steps.
How about the existing steps up to the porch?
The current steps are brick. The steps to the porch are wood.
No, they're brick.
Oh, the brick, steps to the wood porch, yes.
Are they
Yes.
stone?
No, they're
No, right now, you've got a brick
brick,
sidewalk.
right? Your steps into the
Yeah,
house?
No, the steps to the porch are currently brick, and the sidewalk from those steps down to the other steps are brick.
Yes, so that would be changed, that we would change it, or we wouldn't mix, we would, our goal is to change it.
All of it.
To stone, yes.
Because, as Phil just mentioned, I mean, you also have brick facing on the foundation of the porch, I believe? Mhm. So, I mean, you have, and that, the color of the brick goes nicely with the palette you have. I mean, brick fits that house. And
It's appropriate for the date that the house was constructed. It's very appropriate to have a brick.
I would imagine I could find that house appropriately suited with stone, though.
probably, but not in Lewis. Not in Lewis. Our guidelines are about preserving the history of Lewis, not New England or PA or Philadelphia or anywhere else. It's not, we're not looking to have a historic house in Lewis look like it came from Philadelphia or somewhere else. That's our charge. This isn't something we sit here and make up. Our charge, as it's written in the guidelines, is to assist in preserving the historic character and the historic fabric of the city of Lewis. And so that's why you may think we're being sticklers on this, and we are, because we have to be in some cases. The other thing is, we have a couple other areas too.
So my question then back to the landscape, the individuals that put this stone up as landscape, which are retaining walls, are retaining walls.
But they didn't, it wasn't part of the, it wasn't...
It was pre-board.
Well, we don't know when they did it, but I just know that it didn't it wasn't before, it wasn't when this commission was in place. And I know some of them...
So they just get grandfathered in, I guess.
Well, they do, but I recognize some of them as landscaping projects that were just done separately by the homeowner.
And I do recognize the one picture here is the insurance company on Savannah Road, and that was a commercial property that was not in our purview at the time when we were HPC versus HPARC. That approval for that was not Joe can speak to it better, but that they didn't come under architectural review as far as historical precedent. So that's that one. And then the others, I don't recognize any of them, but like I say, in the years that I have served on the commission, stone has never been part of the,
And I think
plan.
some of these are just really short, too. They look like they might be less than a foot. And they're edging to planted areas, alongside sidewalks. So, but this becomes part of the streetscape of the building. And it just, it matters. Yeah. Now, I've got other things I want to read, but before I get into that, Joe, did you want to make some comments? And then I want to move to Michael.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the distance from the edge of the sidewalk to the base of the wall, for where this planting bed's going to be.
I believe was it 2 feet, 3 feet? 3 feet off the sidewalk?
Because if it's going to be landscaped or planted, I mean, no matter what it is, I think the wall's going to disappear behind the bushes. I mean, over the winter, you'll see stuff. You won't see daffodils all spring, spring and summer. But
But our guidelines are read, they read, we make decisions without landscaping.
okay.
When we have to approve a fence,
Do you have the
Yeah.
copy of
Side yards.
what the code says? I just, there was, we were having this discussion about code, and I do believe it does say, but if it doesn't match, if you're saying it doesn't match the period, maybe it doesn't matter, and it should be changed, though, because it is slightly misleading. In here, foundation material, the traditional type of foundation in use in the Lewis Historic District is brick or ballast stone. It does say ballast stone. The use of brick or a brick veneer over a brick block foundation is strongly recommended. Other acceptable materials are natural stone and parging. So it does say ballast stone, but it also says natural stone. So, and that's what kind of, when we, and my point is that we're not trying to do things accordingly. And we read the code, and the code did give us the feeling like this would be acceptable.
It's at the end of the list, though. Number one is brick.
Yeah. And parging, I mean, I have that. These are things, parging, I do a lot of parging. We do all the parging for several builders in the area, and it's nowhere near as acceptable as stone. And that's that's where I get hung up. I understand trying to keep everything looking similar, but there is a lot of stone out there. I mean, that's just in a 2-day bicycle ride. I would imagine we could get another page full.
But we go back to the house itself. We make decisions are based on the compatibility with the house and the streetscape.
are any of these houses on Kings Highway?
That stone, I would probably say, is not the original stone, the brick is not the original stone to the house. So,
If you come up and give your name and...
Yeah, my name's Kevin Keene. I live at 515 Kings Highway, which is right across the street from that.
Yes.
And we actually purchased our houses just about the same time last year. It was a beautiful thing. And both houses, if you saw them, they were overgrown. They had a lot of vegetation hanging off the street.
Yeah.
It was a mess on both sides of the street. Adam did a wonderful job of landscaping his property.
That's a beautiful house.
He improved the house considerably. Okay. My house is one of those older houses, 1904. That was, actually 1902, excuse me, that has a cement wall up front. Okay?
Yes.
By no means does it look historic. I will tell you.
No.
By no means does it look historic.
No,
When you
it's
talk about
not.
the nature of that street, though, the character of that street is a mixed match street. It's mixed matches. There is no consistent character, historic character from a standpoint of aesthetics up and down that street. There's my cement wall. There are brick walls. There are stone pavements down the street. There's no consistency of historical character along this particular stretch of Kings Highway. So to say it doesn't match the street is absolutely nonsensical. It's that particular street is a beautiful street because of the variety of the homes that are up there. It's because of the variety and the beauty of those homes. That's why that street is so beautiful. Okay? And that's what Adam is trying to do, is trying to add to the character of the existing street by providing a beautiful landscape in front of his beautiful home. And I 100% support it. And so does everybody along that stretch of the road. Everybody, my neighbors up and down the road, support Adam in his efforts to do this, because he's doing a wonderful thing to a house that was falling down. Quite frankly,
The house is a beautiful
if those
house,
houses
and it's a
weren't
historic
purchased
house.
when they were purchased, we would be in a bad spot right now. The city would be much worse off if Adam hadn't come in, and quite frankly, if my wife and I hadn't come in, to take over those properties when we did. And we're proud of it.
And thank you for your comments.
Thank you very
I
much.
would think that you guys would be
Right.
jumping up and down. Someone like Adam,
Well-
that's what's
Okay,
going on.
yes, and thank you for, we do appreciate
Yes.
your comments, but let me remind people that, you know, like stone walls, et cetera, that before this commission existed, there was no rules, there was no historic district. So what was there in place already is there in place. Now, if somebody wanted to change that, they would now have to come, because the ordinance of the city is that you have to come before this commission to get approval to do things. So when you talk about properties that have stone walls, et cetera, you have to find out when that became that way. And I can pretty much guarantee you that that was before the existence of this
But doesn't
commission.
that speak to the idea that there are existing stone walls out there?
No,
that
it
speak
doesn't,
to the
no.
variety, the character of the city itself? The idea that you elect, that, yes, they are grandfathered in, okay, but they were prior to this board. I understand that, okay? But doesn't that speak to the variety and character of the city itself? Doesn't that speak to you that the idea that the historic district shouldn't be a single look, a single up and down, there is no single look for what the historic.
No, there's not,
district looks like.
and you can tell that by the variety of the houses. I
That's
think you've made your
exactly right.
point. You've made your point.
But
Do you have any, you've made your point, and I appreciate that very much. But unless you have something new to add that you haven't, okay, then I think it's good to take a seat. Okay, Michael, did you want to say anything before I start to read to everybody?
Sure. Yeah, I guess the first question I have is that there's the reference made to this being stone, natural stone, but from the materials, I'm getting a take that this is basically a synthetic product.
Yeah, yes.
Is that correct?
It's a man-made stone, yeah.
Okay. The other thing I just wanted to say is I totally agree that this particular property, it's a contributing property, contributing structure. It's very, very reflective of a late Victorian era, a Queen Anne style. It has so many architectural elements, including the surrounding ground, that make it unique. It's got the large brick chimney. It's got the wooden louver shutters. It's got the brick foundation. It's got very ornate barge boards. It's got things that other properties along the street have sort of suffered the demise, and they've no longer been sort of included in the overall streetscape. And as my colleagues had mentioned, we're basically tasked with looking at both the city code, which is 197, 56, and actually 197 Article 4, and then the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. And this particular application tonight basically falls under three definitions that are specific to our code. The first being it's a structure. It's a combination of materials to form a construction for use as ornamentation. It's not just limited to buildings, sheds, outbuildings, fences, or storage tanks, but includes bulkheads, jetties, and groins. The streetscape is a very, very important factor. The visual appearance from the street, the size of what's being proposed, and then the public view also comes into play here. So those are the three terms within the city code that this application is specific to. And then in addition to, and our code doesn't really address this directly at this particular time, but according to the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties, we're looking at both a building site, which consists of historic buildings or structures and associated landscape features, and their relationship with a designed or legally defined parcel of land. And it also applies to the whole district neighborhood definition, also included in the Secretary's standards, which is a larger area or environment in which the historic building is located. When reviewing this application against our code 197-59, my interpretation is the construction and use of this artificial retaining wall doesn't demonstrate a compatibility with the relationship of the other architectural features of the structure or the surrounding neighborhood. I also, again, my interpretation would be the exterior design and texture doesn't contribute to the established character of a historic district, as my colleagues have mentioned. This is sandy soil here, and stone was not a really integral part of the construction of buildings around here. And then the 3-foot height also is a little bit disturbing to me, as as was pointed out. The other side of the street is much more elevated, and the side that 514 sits upon is basically much flatter, and the property right to the right of it is elevated like this particular property. And what they've basically done is they've used a combination of the cement or block curb along with sort of a grassy knoll to sort of soften the whole streetscape and visual perspective from the street. According to the Secretary's standards, it's basically been recommended that you retain the historic relationship between the buildings and the landscape features in the setting, and it's not recommended to alter that relationship between buildings and the landscape features. So, as submitted, I think that it doesn't really comply with what we're bound by per the code. The other thing that I sort of did, and I don't know in terms of trying to look at ways to resolve or come to resolution and trying to deal with this whole erosion thing, I looked at, I did some research on the internet, and I came up with some of the codes that address landscaping and sites and what have you, and just some examples that I came up with. There are certain neighborhoods, like the Shaw neighborhood in St. Louis, that absolutely does not allow any sort of walls to be constructed. DC allows them depending upon the neighborhood and then the current structures that are in place in that specific neighborhood. The city of Grand Rapids, Michigan states that the intro of new paving, retaining walls, or garden structures requires closer review than the repair of existing features, and its commission staff must review each proposal on its individual merits. The existence of other historically inconsistent work in the area is not a basis for approval of another inconsistent feature. And then Grand Rapids further states that the styles and materials of retaining walls generally follow the main structure or its foundation. And I think, again, what was being proposed here in the earlier discussion is that if this were to move forward, brick or another natural type material might be more appropriate. So, and then the last piece of information I just sort of came across is the city of Denver basically recommends that in similar types of scenarios that we're looking at here, you do a very, very small, I'm sorry here, basically, and this applies to Denver's Denver Hill neighborhood. Basically, using stabilizing plant material with drought-tolerant planting and other ground cover, it doesn't require mowing to a high degree, rather than constructing a new retaining wall or constructing a subterranean wall to stabilize the slope. So anyway, that's my initial take on the submission.
Okay, thank you, Michael. All right, I'm going to read some sections from our code, and also this is the Secretary of Interior Standards for Treatment of Historic Properties, which is also part of our guidelines, and this is the revised document, which I only printed the page that was applicable to this, and it's building sites, and not recommended is changing the grade level of the site if it diminishes its historic character. For example, lowering the grade adjacent to a building to maximize use of a basement. You're not doing that, which would change the historic appearance of the building and its relationship to the site. Which brings up a question that I had was, did you consider regrading it? If the purpose of this was to, so you didn't have erosion on the front slope, and it sounds like you're going to remove the whole brick walk anyway, and redo all the steps, did you consider regrading it so you had a gradual slope, which would be, somewhere in between the two properties on either side of you, and sort of as far as the streetscape would be very compatible? You don't have to answer that, at least not right now. The other thing I want to read is 19759 criteria, criteria. And A2 is the relationship of the exterior architectural features of the structure to the remainder of the structure and to the surrounding neighborhood, distinctive styles, features, examples. I'm not sure that was I marked the right one, but let me see, 19759, A3, okay. So, general compatibility of exterior design, arrangement, texture, and materials proposed. So again, we're going back to the compatibility of the house, other structures contributing to the established character of the historic district. And 9. And then standards is preservation is the preservation compatibility of new construction and materials. And we have B9, which is walls. Walls, fences, and gates. Materials shall be a type compatible with the architecture of the historic district and historic properties. Again, we go back to the compatibility of that particular house and the streetscape. That's what we're charged to view it on, because Lewis is very diverse, and it has evolved over time. And so the, you don't compare one structure to a structure on the other side of town that may be of a totally different period. So I think number one, it's artificial stone, which we don't permit. Brick is consistent with the house.
And the period.
And the period of the house. And the fact that the retaining wall is higher than either properties makes me question whether or not there's a possibility of an alternative approach. And since you're taking out all the steps in the walk, would you consider a sloping grade with a shorter wall that wouldn't be quite as prominent and of brick? Yes, sir.
Just wanted to clarify the height issue. So the height of the wall is actually, it's the top of the stairs from the sidewalk to the top of where the house is. That's the 3 feet. It doesn't go above the current stair height.
I understand that, but 3 feet is pretty high for a wall right alongside the sidewalk. And
Sure. I just wanted to make sure that it was understood that we're not going above
No.
the current
No.
ground level.
Right.
Where the path starts.
Right. No, I did understand that, and it was very clearly marked on your submission as well. So,
And I have, since we're talking about height, and I notice on the survey, you show,
you have to sit up.
oh, I'm sorry. Since we're talking about height, and on the survey, you show the wall returning along the driveway to keep the backfill from spilling into the driveway. Are you going to, would you also then consider having a return on your neighbor side so that what you put in and is higher than their land is, their site is?
I don't believe it's higher.
I need you to go to the mic. I'm sorry.
I don't believe that that's higher. I think the neighbor's lot is actually higher than... Yeah, I mean, we would turn it just to give it symmetry.
Well, that's what,
more than anything else.
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And then you also build a retaining wall on either side of the steps so that
Yeah.
the soil is kept in there too.
For sure. It has that. And
So with all of that, visually, that's a lot of stone, and I don't think I go right back to my original question, when was the house built? When the house was built, brick would have been used. And so in keeping historically with the house, I would support a brick wall, but I will not support a stone wall.
I've done a lot of work in Ship Carpenters and properties in Ship Carpenters. We've actually, I understand your job, and I appreciate it as a resident. But I also believe that the rigidity of it, can become a problem.
Ship Carpenter is all moved houses.
Right.
That are
Right.
quite a broad
A lot of stone over
dates.
there, and we've done a lot of, I've done a lot of brick work over there as well.
But that doesn't matter, because this house is on Kings Highway, and we're talking about this particular house.
Well, we're talking
and
about Lewis.
No, the guidelines are specific to the streetscape and the individual
The
house.
streetscape is a hodgepodge of material.
The one street that this house is on, most important is the house itself.
Yeah.
That is dominant in our reviewing the guidelines. And that alone trumps everything else, is the appropriateness to the house.
I would, do you ever have, you don't have any pictures of the house in its early stage, do you? Is there anything like that? Because, like I said, the brick that's there is not of the time.
Well, of course not, probably not.
Right.
Because the elevation of the houses on both sides of the street is suspect to how the road was originally placed. There weren't retaining walls on your house originally. It was probably a slope from the one side of the street to the other side of the street and had a dirt road there.
I'm sorry. I can tell you, I'm sorry, I can tell you for a fact that it was built on, the stone wall was there when the house was built, because there's a date written in the cement.
What year is that?
1902.
In the concrete wall?
In the concrete wall, there's a date and the name, Mr. Wilson, who was the pastor of the church right down the
Okay.
street.
All right, thank you. Okay. All right, well, that clarifies his house, but we're talking about your house. I know you keep trying to sidetrack us, but we have guidelines that we follow, and what's appropriate for the house trumps everything else that goes on in Lewis. And also, no, you have to come up to the mic. No, there's no artificial stone permitted.
Who dictates what is appropriate for that house, though? What if that house had stone originally? What if the foundation of that and the walkway and was originally stone?
It would be a different period, and it wouldn't be in Lewis.
I don't agree with that. I don't believe that's necessarily the case. I think materials were used based on individuals, just as they are now.
We are going back to the history of this particular house.
But we don't know what the original.
We know there was no stone used in this area because it was not
That's
available.
not true at all. There's houses made completely out of stone in the town of Lewis,
Of the same period.
or if not older. I guess
Well,
we should have made. What we should have maybe done is gotten some more pictures of entire homes.
What you need to do is recognize that our guidelines are specific to the house of the applicant before us. And that is, and the compatibility of what the applicant wants to do with the streetscape.
Right.
It's pretty narrow.
Well, it is, but it's based on what's there, which is not its original scene. The scenery of it, the construction of it, wasn't that original, wasn't that brick that's there. It may have been stone, and I don't know that. It may have been stone, it may have been something else. It may have been, limestone block or something like that, which we've seen some houses that are made out of limestone blocks. So I think we're giving this gentleman's house a label that may not actually be its true label. And I don't think anybody really knows
Yes,
that, because I
yes.
don't think any of us were here when it was
I think we have enough historic data to know when these streets came into place. And we have the guidelines that direct us to review each structure and with the streetscape.
Okay.
So that's our charge.
Yeah, I understand.
And our charge is not to find a way around the guidelines because you would like to use stone. That's not our charge.
Also, in the application, you indicated that you were going to be adding a screened-in porch on the left side of the house.
There is, I'm sorry. We're working on architectural drawings for that, and that obviously would go in accordance to any of the materials, and it's,
That's not before us tonight, though.
It's not before us.
That's not before us
It's
tonight.
not before us.
yeah, I think we're coming back in September, so this was a,
Okay.
You know.
I think we beat this subject to
Yeah,
death enough. Okay.
yeah.
All right, so the application before us is for the stone wall and steps as presented. So we need to vote on that. And then,
Motion.
and so you have to vote, the motion has,
We have to have a motion.
we have to have a motion, and the motion has to be,
All right, well, I will make the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Because this application concerns a property that is addressed as 514 Kings Highway in Lewis, Delaware, and is contributing, uses previously approved materials, conforms with the rhythm and scale of the requirements of Lewis, and is in the Lewis Historic District. I move that the application be approved as submitted.
what?
Well,
Make a positive motion.
you make a positive motion, and then the
Okay.
positive motion is
Okay.
either voted up or down.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you. Give me a fright there for a minute. Do I have a second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor of,
Do we vote, do we
Roll
have to?
call.
Yeah, I would do it.
yes,
Madam Chair, a roll call vote would be preferred.
yes, sir. George, you made the motion, you get to go first.
Okay. I do like your design. I'm not a big proponent of retaining walls, for kind of landscaping purposes, but I don't consider that to be my business, I think that what we are charged with is the materials and the look of how that looks and how it relates to the property. So I think you've got a beautiful design. I love the landscaping that you have in this mock-up. But if I would vote to approve if the material were brick. But as it is, I would have to vote no.
Joe?
I'm going to have to vote no. I was initially liked the stone. It looks very natural, even though it's man-made. But hearing the historic background of the house and the period, I tend to agree now that brick would be more appropriate.
Okay, Phil?
First off, I've been here long enough to recognize what a great job you're doing on restoring this house and not just restoring it, but bringing it way past that. The date of the house says that historically the wall should be brick, and so therefore I'm going to also vote no.
Okay. Michael?
Yeah, I also concur with my fellow commissioners. I would vote no as well.
Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner Wyder, and the reason why?
Yeah, because it's a contributing structure, it's in the Lewis Historic District, and I don't think that the current materials show general compatibility or contribute to the established character of the streetscape.
Thank you. I do vote no. It doesn't follow our guidelines. It's artificial stone, and the brick is historically correct for that period of house. And even though you submitted an absolutely beautiful rendering that it looks gorgeous, but we have to follow our guidelines. And so I too vote no. Okay. Yes, sir?
May I ask, so if it were, obviously, nobody's for it, and I understand that, and I understand you have a job to do, and if you believe that's the case, then I'm happy to adhere to the board's recommendations. The wall is necessary. If my client decides to move forward with it, and he decides he does want to do brick is not his preference, it still will require we would still like to put the stone cap on it, a brick wall with a stone cap. Is it just no stone available? I mean...
What kind of stone cap?
Whether it be a limestone, which would be very, but he prefers a blue stone. I'm sure we could go find plenty of that around here, and limestone. It just gives it a flat surface versus just, having a brick. It makes it nicer looking, maybe.
I think usually on a brick capping, they don't they usually use that coping kind of material?
Yeah, well, that's what we're talking about.
Well, you're talking about like a stone material as opposed to...
You're talking about real bluestone or real...
Yes.
Not synthetic?
Nope.
Okay.
But also, there are, historically, there are brick walls that have brick, the cap on the brick wall, and the cap overhangs the brick, overhangs the brick below. There are plenty, and there are brick walls that are done with design in them, so they look like they have panels of recessed brick on the face, and then the face is also brick. There's been a lot of historic walls that you may not want to do all of that, and then that's fine. But brick isn't just a flat wall of brick and it goes up and it stops. It can have a brick cap, it can have a stone.
Yeah, it can have a brick cap.
You can change the direction of the brick, you can have some thickness to it, just not the thickness of the brick.
So we're saying no to any stone. So no brick with stone treads for the stairs, which becomes a little bit, it gives it a better step than potentially brick.
There are so many steps that are brick, it doesn't give them a better step.
Is that a no?
Yes.
That's a no?
Yes.
There's a no for any stone capping as well? Okay. I just need to know.
Okay.
May I say something? This application, that application is not before us. We are dealing with what has been presented to us.
Yes.
So we need to keep on track with that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the application has a stone cap to it. So whether we change the brick to...
It's already been voted down. So if you want to bring something else before the commission, you would have to go back to Robin.
Okay.
Okay, we cannot review another
Well, yeah, I
iteration.
understand that.
Yeah, I know, you were just
It's
looking for feedback, I understand
Yeah,
that.
because, do I have to do it in all brick if we do it, or is it just the face has to be brick? I don't...
Just talk to Robin tomorrow.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I think he can provide some guidance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right.
Okay, are we done?
You're free to go.
Okay, lovely.
And thank you for the drawings.
Yeah, have a nice night.
You too.
Your house is beautiful.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Go back to my piles of paper here. All right, so we have unfinished business, which is update, discussion, and possible action on the resurvey of the historic district. So what I have, when I find my papers, is the state finally approved the rough draft. The SHPO finally approved Chad's rough draft for this last survey that will complete the resurveying the whole historic district. And we were also notified, we've been waiting for notification on this, there were additional funds, not huge, but additional funds available. And I sent a letter to Anne Marie and, Anne Marie regarding this for confirmation. Originally, our grant award was $4,533 with a minimum match of $3,022. Total project cost $7,555. The match for this portion is provided by the University of Delaware through CHAD. So when we get extra money, it doesn't cost us anything.
Right.
CHAD ups their, and
That's
so
right.
so we're now up to a total project cost of $11,000 from $7,555 to $11,627,000, which is nice because they had already done the work. They were assuming this is how it was going to go. So we've got all that taken care of. And now it's a matter of Chad finalizing the paperwork and then submitting everything, and we're talking a couple more months, I think, for that.
Right.
In the meantime, we've been looking at the past surveys, which we're now using, and I know Ted had looked at the early ones when they first came in 6 years ago, and also Michael has looked at a few and pointed out some discrepancies. So we're going to have to go through one by one and mark the discrepancies when we find them, whether it's just a material or whatever it might be. And then we're going to, I already talked to Chad about the procedure on this, so I'm going to notify Chad, they're going to correct them, and then they're going to pass on the corrected version, submit the corrected version to the state. And that will help expedite it as opposed to sending it to the state first, which...
How many are there, Barbara?
7. This is the 7th. This is the 7th, yeah, so. Okay, so that takes care of that.
And just for clarification, CHAD is the Center for Historic and Architectural Design.
Of the University of Delaware, and it's in that, yeah. Okay. The other thing, let's see, so the next thing we have under new business is discussion and possible action regarding a review of HPARC ordinance for potential clarification, changes, and additions. Now, as part of this, we are fortunate, and I'm going to send this to everybody, but I wanted to tell you about it so you can be on the lookout. NAPC, we're a CLG, so we qualify as a certified legal government through the state, and I believe there's also a national step in there. Because we have a historic districts, and because we have a preservation commission that reviews all work, and that's how we become a CLG. And as a CLG, we can also join the National Alliance of Preservation Commissioners, which is national. Last summer, every 2 years, they put on a big preservation forum. And last year, because of COVID, it was all done Zoom. And all the commissioners were signed up for it. I don't know how many of you actually did anything with that. Michael's saying yes, okay. And so they're now doing some short courses. They've had a couple the last couple of months. So now there's one called and they go by NAPC, Summer Short Courses, which will be just 2 days, August 24th and 25th. And one of the subjects is something that we periodically encounter, and that's alternate materials. The good, the bad, and the ugly is what they call it. The other subject is, do you have a permit for that? Enforcement and violations. We also have that periodically. And translating your skills, time, talent, and treasure. I'm not quite sure what that's going to be. Disaster planning and recovery for historic communities and overview. We don't really address that, but it would be good to learn about it. How to date and appreciate mid-century. We don't include mid-century in our district or in our guidelines, but a lot of people are, and so it's always good to know about it. And then finding funding for your preservation program, a primer on grant writing and application. I am going to send this to each of you, okay? I'm also going to send, because I was talking to the district chair, a nice woman that makes things simpler, Marie Snyder. So I told her that I would like to make all of mayor and council aware of this, and anybody who wanted to, could participate. And of course, I always notify Robin. And so the way we're going to do it, because I don't want the city to pay for everybody if they're not going to go. So the way it's going to work is we have a free registration coupon code that is registered for Lewis. And you'll have to plug in but everybody's going to have to, this time, everybody will have to register themselves. So we will only pay for those people that register.
What are the dates again?
It is the 24th and 25th. Now, in addition, this will be recorded, and you will have, somewhere it told me how long you have. You have like 30 or 60 days to view it. So if you just have some conflict that you can't possibly...
And all the subjects you read, are they on both days, or are they spaced out on one day and then the next, or are they repeated the second day?
Okay, there's 3 on the 24th and 3 on the 25th. And they're always, and they give you the times. Like the first one I read is the 24th, 12 to 1:30, and then they give you a half hour, and then they have, the next one is 2 to 3:30, and then you get a half hour, and it's 4 to 5:30. And it's the same schedule for the 2
All
consecutive.
spelled out there.
Yeah.
Great, okay.
And they did the same thing last summer. They had these like half days, more or less.
That's it, yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm going to be in Chicago on those dates for an NAR
Oh, really?
conference.
But it's recorded. You can still...
Well, that's the thing, is if it's
Yeah.
recorded, I'm more interested in the recording
Yes,
than I am.
yes. And I was looking for where they
Well, I
said...
did attend, I was on that
Oh, did you?
thing, yeah.
Oh,
It
extra
was very
stories.
interesting, but he was kind of dry.
Oh, you mean the recent one?
Yeah.
That was Preservation Delaware.
Right.
Yeah, that was...
He was kind of
But
dry.
well, he's aged out a bit. Yeah, but he is just so renowned
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
university,
yeah.
and as far as a preservation historian. The thing that, and what we're talking about is the Preservation Delaware does almost monthly, but they frequently skip a month, and I notify everybody when the next presentation is going to be, and this was last week, I think. Yeah.
Last week, yeah.
And it was about period furniture, or periods of houses,
Houses of periods, yeah.
And what I found most interesting was that he would show photographs of particular period houses, and then show how point out what the characteristics were of that period, and then also show photographs of a simplified version, which is what we're more apt to have on Lewis, is like the...
It was a farmhouse
Yeah,
versus a city house.
It was very interesting. I just wanted to let you know I was there.
Thank you. Check you off.
I was impressed that he had examples of the different style houses all in Delaware.
Yes, that's what he taught. He taught that's what he taught. Yes.
Yeah, but to collect all those...
But he's done this for years. He taught at the University of Delaware. He was the head senior preservation
Ancho.
architect. Yes. And, so Preservation Delaware, Michael Emmons
Right,
was under
I
him.
recognized him.
Yeah, and so he was his teacher, So anyway, but I thought that was the most interesting thing, is that, because when I've seen pictures of some of these Gothic and styles, I think, well, we don't have those houses here. But then when he showed us that those styles, whether there was a center peak, whether it was even matched windows, whether it had a porch, whether it never had a porch, so the characteristics of that period carried over and were emulated even in more simple environments.
There's a modern Gothic along West 4th Street.
Yeah.
Yes.
You see that one, yes.
Yes.
I would call that trickling down.
Okay.
It was,
Well, you can call it that.
because, you know, the originals were probably much, much more expensive than the
Well, and
simplified
depending on whether they were in the city,
Yeah.
Wilmington, Philadelphia, or whether...
Or Lewis.
Or Lewis, or even a farm building, you know?
Yeah,
There were
yeah.
certain characteristics of a particular period. Almost all structures had similarities of the pattern of windows, whether it had a porch, whether it didn't have a porch, and sometimes even a particular style of a front door. But then when you got to the city, all those things were embellished. And that's what I thought was fascinating about that.
Yeah, and
It was very
often
interesting.
styles of architecture were in cities. That's where architects practiced.
Right.
And as you got outside the city, they changed it a little because they were done by lay people, and they weren't going towards the pure, the Greek revival, for example. As you got down here, we have a bank on 2nd Street that has a little bit of Greek revival.
That's right. Yeah, because that would have been the period that those banks were built. And a lot of banks in that period. There's a couple up in Milford
Yeah.
that same similarities, you know.
My first preservation project, which was 45 years ago, was restoring a Greek revival church in Yorktown, New York.
All good stuff.
Yes, okay.
So I'm glad there's recordings for that.
Yes,
Good.
yes, it will be recorded, and I think it's either 30 or 60 days, but I'll find that out, and I'll include it in the email. I'm just not seeing it right now. So you can also get continuing ed credits, but you don't need those anymore. That's what I told, she said, well, make sure you notice that. I said, I don't think there's anybody on the commission that would...
I don't have any
that's
licenses anymore.
licensed for, applicable things. So the other thing is back to this new business, discussion possible action regarding a review of the HPARC ordinance for potential clarification, changes, and additions. So we've had a so-called running list, which we have to clean up a bit and also add to it. It seems frequently that some of these things don't come up until we have an applicant that perhaps we feel, gee, wish we had a little more there. One of the things I would recommend is that everybody go online and look up the Secretary of Interior standards. I'll include this complete name. And actually what I'm going to send you is Michael had looked this up and sent me a link, so I'm just going to forward the link to each of you so you can look it up. I'm assuming it's available in print, but if you have the link and you save it somewhere where you can get to it, it's a great reference just to see what the guidance is at the federal level for preservation. These are the Secretary of Interior standards for treatment of historic properties and this specifically is with guidelines for preserving, rehabilitating, restoring, and reconstructing historic buildings. And there's tons of stuff in there that would never apply to the kind of applicants we get, but it's really good to go back and find, because they do everything with recommended and not recommended. And it's great to get that, national take on it, which is who That's who sends the funds through the State of Delaware Historic Office that funds are resurveying and other things, so. Okay, so I'm going to ask each of you over time to have a piece of paper down and start jotting down things that you recall coming up in the past that we have seemed lacking in our ordinance, either in clarification or maybe not even there at all. I think Randy had mentioned something about not having anything about doors, but in actuality, the doors, again, have to be appropriate to the period of the house.
Yes.
So the other ordinance that...
Madam Chair, if I could make a recommendation on how to proceed on that.
Sure.
What I think would be the best thing to do, because ultimately this is amending an ordinance, and mayor and council are the only people that are going to be authorized to do that.
I understand that.
They do take their lead, I think, from groundwork that this commission does, because this commission is the commission that lives and breathes this ordinance. What I would recommend that I think would be very helpful for mayor and council, so that they're not having to go through and do a lot of the heavy lifting, is for perhaps us, this commission to make a series of recommendations, to review those recommendations as a line item at a public meeting, and then vote whether or not to send those recommendations to mayor and council. And I think that would go a long way. That's my recommendation on how to handle that sort of situation.
Thank you. We have done this in the past, and that's exactly the procedure. Sometimes we actually have appointed a subcommittee, some of which includes commissioners, and sometimes it's included non-commissioners. We did that, well, when we were still HPC was the last time that was done. And so we have our list of things that we feel need additional information or are not included at all. And then we work all through that, and the commission is supportive of that. And then if it's changed to the ordinance, mayor and council will want to have a public meeting, is how it has worked in the past. And I don't know if they would prefer having I think that's way down the line as far as I'm concerned. I just want to get all this information, have us agree on what things need to be added or clarified, and work out some things that we feel would be helpful and are important. And then I think we can cross the next bridge, whether mayor and council wants to review all that prior to a public hearing or which way they want to go. That would be their call. We understand that.
Perfect.
Robin, did you want to add anything?
No, that's fine. I think you presented.
Did I steal your thunder?
No, that's fine. You did good.
Okay, Carolyn?
No, I wrote it down just to remind, to bring it up.
To bring it up?
Yes.
Let them know what we're up to?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, no, this is,
So for now, you just want us to jot down some
yes, I do.
things for the next meeting?
Yeah, I don't want to have to do it all.
I hear you.
Barbara, I have one question. We and the Planning Commission recently went through the joint project development, whatever that acronym is.
It's a site plan review.
Whatever that joint site plan. Does that have to be mentioned anywhere in our minutes or?
I don't know.
Bylaws?
It is in our bylaws.
Already? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it was in the revised one.
Right.
Yeah, it's in here.
Tells you how much I know. Okay, so that settles that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely in here. and-
Three from each, right?
Right,
Yes,
the
it
Joint Site
is, I
Development
think.
Review Committee.
Where is it?
That's in our,
Okay.
Yeah, I won't be able to find it now, but it's here.
it's there.
Oh, it's, okay, all right, that's.
Yeah, it is definitely,
definitely,
yeah,
okay,
because
good
it was part of it was established as part of combining HPC and CARC.
Okay.
And so what I asked is that in the future, that when there is a meeting, Phil's going to be on the next ad hoc committee, and it's the end of August.
Yes.
Yes.
There's
And-
a meeting date set. I don't have it with me. It's like
That's
the
okay.
25th or something of August.
Right. And so what I asked is that when the notification go out, that everybody on the commission be notified. But I was reminded that I already get that notification as part of the city, but of course, I'm only going to get it a week ahead. I'm not going to get it like Phil got it, yeah, or you got it that one time. Yeah. So I could, because I think, a lot of us are interested, even if we're not on that ad hoc committee. And I think it's important that if you're able to, that you can listen in on it. It's important. So anyway, so that's, yeah. So we're good. But I don't know whether we should include it in the minutes when we have, it wouldn't be in the minutes because we're not taking part. I don't know that it should be referenced.
Mentioned.
Maybe just mentioned after the fact or before, if we know about it before. So now we're mentioning it. It's the end of August.
So you fulfilled it.
Yes, and I will, and Phil can call me with the date when he gets home or something, let me know, and then I can just send out an email to everybody with the date, and then you'll have it. And then when we get the, and I assume everybody is on the email list from the city, so you get the agendas for these different things. Okay, very good. All right, let me see. I think we're down to chair and staff.
Everyone received a copy of the report.
Yes, we did.
There were 8 total for the month of July. Had 7 approvals and 1 denial. Both of them are basically all just standard reviews that the commission has read and passed, nothing major. The denial was for aluminum storm door on the Cannibal House, which was denied.
Very historic building.
Yes, and it was also after the fact.
Yeah. I did receive a permit today. I've not looked at it, but I think they're going back to the wood that they had on there.
Okay.
They could paint it silver.
They had it painted.
Yeah, it was painted dark brown.
Yeah, it was painted, yeah, but it was,
Was it a donation or on sale?
they bought it.
Let's get it on sale.
Probably putting it on another historic house. Okay, any questions about the chair and staff? No? Okay.
No.
All right, and, okay. Then I think that's all. Carolyn, did you want to ask any questions or
Oh,
make any comments? Or
no, I'm perfectly fine, but thank you for asking.
Okay, very good. Robin, any additions or suggestions?
I was just going to ask, do you want to get put on that, what you said about the notification for the preservation workshops and stuff?
Oh, I'm gonna send it to.
Oh, you get it, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
I
I just want to make sure you,
No, Carolyn is in the HPARC group.
Okay.
I've got my little group.
there you go.
No, I get it.
But I'm also going to send it to Ted and the rest of council members, Anne Marie, and, they just have to register themselves.
We all did.
You all do.
We all did.
And then, we have a little budget, and I'll also contact Anne Marie first before I send any of this out, to just let her know and make sure it's okay with her.
Sure.
I'll ask permission. And, but last year, we did the same thing, and I explained the benefit of it. We are also charged, although I don't know that we've ever gotten a penalty, for actually doing continuing education and training, on a yearly basis. And so this actually, would help with that.
Yeah, that's one of the requirements as a certified local government.
Yeah, so.
So if we wanted to do a topic in that direction, like windows and historic windows in Lewis, typical, and what is, what are the different style windows that represent the historic district? That would be continuing education. It would be like the presentation we had where we did the history of the different styles that we just went through.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it would just be focusing on Lewis and windows.
Yeah, we just either have to find somebody to present that, or you'd have to present it, because you're the most knowledgeable.
I vote for Phil.
I second it.
I make a motion.
No,
It's an interest of mine,
I know.
because we get before us applications, and time after time, we see the same window details. And windows are so important. If you really go around Lewis and look at windows, and you begin to see how many different styles there are. And when we get applications here, we get the same trim up the side of the window, across the top of the window still sometimes an apron, sometimes not an apron. It's an area where I think we have to tighten things up a little bit, and because it represents character of our architecture.
Well, number one on your list, your homework list.
yeah. I think there's,
Not stare into too many windows, makes people
Yeah,
nervous.
Phil, I mean, as you know, as an architect, and an architect who's done a lot of historic preservation, there are characteristics of all the different elements.
Yes.
And so even, and I came across a little book recently that I had in my stash that showed all the different period of furniture, and they broke down the doors and the windows and the trim around the roof, and so I mean that would be something. And some of the and some guidelines from other historic towns actually show a lot of pages of drawings.
Yeah.
Showing
They
you
do.
all the periods. And and actually, Old Newcastle, the city of Old Newcastle in Delaware, you can go online and you can look at their current guidelines, which were revised 4 years ago, I guess 5 years ago. And I have a copy of the one that's dated, and I think this one is current 2017 maybe, for Old Newcastle. I have a written copy of, I think it was 2009, or maybe older than that, which I had gotten from them when we were first forming HPC. So it might be older than that. It's probably 119 something. So, but I'll bring that in next time and just show you how they approached it. Now they have formatted it completely different this time. But what they did was they identified each period, Georgian, and so they actually go through and they show you a Georgian a door, what the door is like, and it's most educational and interesting, and so we can talk about whether that kind of thing. To me, the more information we have in our guidelines, it's twofold. I think it helps us, it helps future commissioners, and it also is hopefully takes out some of the confusion or frustration that applicants might have, which always concerns me, is when, of course in this case, there was just a lack of talking to Robin. But, the easier and the more informative our guidelines are, the better it is for preservation, the better it is for the city of Lewis, the better it is for all of us. I mean, it's a win-win, I think. So it may take some work, and since we won't be funding another survey, I've got this would be something that we could fund with that appropriated money in this year's budget. I mean, there's a lot of things we could do with that money, but that's one. I mean, consolidating the 7 years of surveys is another thing we could do with that money. And I know Anne Marie had hoped that in-house, and I don't know if they've ever had the time to go anywhere with that, Robin, I don't know if you're aware of. She had hoped that she was going to be able to put all those surveys online and create a user-friendly system where you could just put in the address you're looking for and the page would pop up.
They're still looking to do that. I just don't know how far along that is, but
Yeah.
it's probably going to take a little work.
Yeah, I think it is too, and whether it's going to take, another, it's going to take some work. But right now, I mean, we're using them. Yeah.
Yeah, a minute ago you mentioned Old Newcastle.
Yes.
And I had an appointment up in Wilmington, but on the way back, my wife and I stopped in Old Newcastle. It's like Williamsburg. I mean, walking around, first off, it was a cloudy, rainy day.
Yeah.
So it felt historic. But walking around, I said to Mary Lee, it's like being in Williamsburg.
Your first time there? Is that the first time you've been there?
No, I've been there before, but because Preservation Delaware used to meet in the courthouse before the federal government took over and kicked us out.
Oh, okay. That's too bad.
But we went also to look at the Presbyterian Church because I had heard it was beautiful and very historic, and it was. I couldn't get inside. The doors were locked. I tried them. But it's a worthwhile trip to.
It's beautiful, and they do have like a garden day when some buildings are open, and they also have, I think they still have a Christmas tour that has a few of the historic structures open. But yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. Yeah, it's lovely. So, okay, now that I've dragged this on.
I'll make the motion, we adjourn.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good night, Michael.
See you, Michael.
Good night, you guys.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, Brian. Yes.
And all the ships at sea.
How do we,